Thank you for tuning into another recording from me on this channel, Loved by the Water. Loved by the Water is also an Instagram, it's also a Patreon account, and it's also a Linktree. And all of those different platforms are me. They're spaces for my creative work, for my ceremonial service and offerings, coaching, consulting, all on topics related to the very watery aspects of ourself, the emotional body and the spiritual body as they are reflected in the physical body and in the mind. So that said, this is a recording that is an update or follow-up to my Sunbury presentation, the geomancy work that I did. And even geomancy is this really watery kind of research process, because you can just keep going and going and going, and you can keep digging, and it spreads out like a spider web, and you can just keep weaving that web as large as you'd like. And I kept weaving. I also began noticing my own emotional, mental construct framework that I was bringing, better said, enslaying my attitude that I was bringing to the material that I was discovering. And so the first part of the video is my beloved Michael witnessing and helping me kind of get that out and allow that to be a part of this process. That's a very important aspect of community to me, and of communication, is knowing the channel or the vessel that information or energy is coming through. So the first half of this video is me being as present and transparent as I can be to the colors I have on my lenses. So, and then the second half of the video, I have more interesting maps and more interesting kind of connections that I've discovered from researching keystones, arcs, and baseball diamonds. Here we go. A month ago, I recorded content that was, for the most part, pretty heady, but I noticed from reviewing my recording and feeling what I felt like afterwards, and going out into the world and like moving around for the month of March, and all these different things happening, including, the bridge, and that it wasn't just all head material. It wasn't just all like factual or observations. There was some judgment coming through based on feelings, based on subjectivity, based on how I perceive certain activity in the mainstream or along the main branch. What is most in alignment with what I'm wanting to be doing is now, like, there's a lot of like kind of emotional stuff to unpack. So it's not only emotional, but we've been on this journey through the month of March, traveling around, talking to different people, moving. And the only other place that you and I kind of really record regularly together is the Loved by the Water podcast. The next season of that is Mastered by Emotion. We just did Ruled by the Moon and Loved by the Water, and I'm really feeling like this past month of March there's been a lot of motion, which means connecting with a lot of different people and getting their feedback, like real-time human feedback on some of the stuff that we're researching, some of the stuff we're thinking and feeling. And that Sunbury presentation, we've both done a lot more research, and there's more interesting facts to share and more interesting artistry to share. But even more importantly, because I tend to place a high value on feelings and emotion, is like my own emotional experience with this work and content. That is extremely difficult to share just looking at a camera, because it's such a human experience, like being an emotional being. So that's the because. That's all of that is thank you, because what I want to share now is so human that I need a witness for it to be genuine or real, or for it to feel safe for me, I guess, too. Like, I can't just look into the camera and talk about these things. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
As my witness. And you've been with me on all these motions, and you've been a part of all of these conversations. And I've been talking to you about this all along the way. And so looking back at the Sunbury presentation, I notice in myself that I have an inclination towards distrust. Imagine that. And it's distrust of the mainstream society. It's distrust of anyone who's done anything that's participated in the development of domination, culture. It's distrust in my ancestors, like the people who built all this stuff that I'm a part of. And so, I'm getting closer and closer. It's like distrust in myself. Like, if I'm distrusting my ancestors, if I'm distrusting the people who came before me that built all of this, all of my ancestors are walking behind me, and it's just my job to be still and listen. And ultimately, I'm the result of the love of thousands. And to think that there are this lineage of like masonry workers, or like the 1%, or whatever we want to call them, there's all this language to create an other that's not me, and they're the ones doing all of the bad, dark, evil stuff. That's just me projecting and repressing my own, like, I've got bad, dark, and evil inside of me. And so I'm just finding a place to shove it out there out of the sake of truth, and out of the sake of, like, we've got to fight the system. That's what we keep doing over and over and over. Like, burn it down, build it up, burn it down, build it up. Like, that's kind of creating insanity. Would you like to say anything to that, except for just, yeah?
I'll keep going. Let me see where you go.
So I'm just noticing in the Sunbury video, the presentation, like, yes, I presented some interesting facts and ideas, but I also was carrying an energy of distrust and of, like, judgment of the mainstream, the main branch of the Susquehanna, the dominant families in Cooperstown, the domination of masonry on the island, on Packer Island, the, ew, water, like, doing that to the water, like, oh, that's so gross, like, oh, you drink closed loop system water, just like all of that, it's snottiness, it's judgment, and really at the end of the day, like, what I've noticed over this past month is that it all comes back to, it's a lack of acceptance of the full continuum and spectrum of myself, being both that dark and light, masculine and feminine, like, that's all me. And there is a middle path, kind of like societies and cultures get into this, like, polar swing. And what it does is it creates such a tension that all that can emerge is this spontaneous new middle, almost like a brand new archetype that never existed before in, like, the Jungian philosophy. And, I'm familiar from, like, Israel Regard and other, like, tantric
esotericists,
philosophies and esotericists, that there is this middle path, and the middle path is not bridging, right? You were just saying earlier when I was on my roller coaster ride of emotions about this video, about the bridge having to collapse, because it's not about bridging. It's about weaving the waters between the lands. And so that the dark in me, or the 1% in me, or the dominator in me, and then the submissive in me, or the 99% in me, how it's not about like I'm going to bridge these two and walk back and forth between them, but how am I going to allow the river of my own life force weave these streams together, like weave the West Branch and the North Branch, and allow that flow to be truth, allow that to be truth, and not just like facts and research and uncovering the darkness of humanity, like, and showing up and be like, this is the truth, you know, like our whole entire existence is built on lies and rape and killing and savagery. Yes, and okay, like it doesn't end there. There was also a lot of like love and good intention, and I don't know, they're my ancestors and they birthed me forward. And so if I want to go and say that some of these people, or there's like one person in my lineage who participated in annihilation of the tribal people who were living here, that's in me, because that's my ancestor. So that's in me. And so like I kind of, in reconciling freedom for myself, I'm liberating my ancestor from the consequences. I don't want to condone, but there's like a deeper thing going on here. Like taking the chains off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Taking like it's already the natural consequence of participating in domination culture and society is already clear. Mm-hmm. You know, like the pain is already consequence enough for me to come along and just heap more distrust on top of it. Mm-hmm. It's not all bad, black, and evil. Like, to think that we have the whole picture when we say like, oh, there's the bad guy, mm-hmm. or oh, there is the root of domination, mm-hmm. like we can't possibly have the whole picture. And I guess that's what I'm noticing in myself in the Sunbury videos. I'm thinking like, oh, I'm getting the whole picture, but I don't have the whole picture.
Right.
Because just like I want to weave the dark and light in me, those are also human beings and people with like fields, unless you believe in like alien stuff, but all beings have all of this energy accessible to them. It's in them. I mean, the people who like put these diamond baseball fields in all these different ways that will be shown later in the video, you could get really carried away in your mind being like, holy cow, like conspiratorially, like these baseball diamonds all point to each other, home plate to home plate, and they follow ley lines. What people know such deep things, and then they're going and designing the way that energy flows. I'm just wanting to go back to my Sunbury presentation and add like a lot more appreciation for the love that is present, mm-hmm. and the flow of the bigger waters that are much bigger than me, and then also add more, because I did that, because I like kind of freed my mind and my mound followed. It's like my ancestors were speaking through people that we've met in this month, mm-hmm. and I've allowed my ancestors freedom to speak instead of being like, oh, well, you might have been a Mason, so like I don't want to hear from you because like you kind of created a fucked up system. But opening the door and just, okay, I'll listen. Like no judgment, no blame casting, no scapegoating, right? Yeah, because that's in me too. And I would just be like putting that on my ancestor, and further adding to the consequence, which is just going to put it onto my children, mm-hmm. and it's just going to keep going and going in this cycle. And I guess that's circulation, but I want to stop. I want to circulate something different. I want to circulate something more pure, something more whole. That's not saying we've got the whole picture, but we're all allowed to show up at the table. And therefore, if everyone's allowed to show up at the table, then with open minds and open hearts, no predetermined agenda or idea of what this is and is going to be, but we all just are allowed to show up at the table with all of our parts, then maybe that middle path emerges. But first, that middle path, I need to allow it to emerge in me before I can even imagine it showing up in a whole, like a collection of people. So that's just the opening.
That's the opening. That's the big opening.
That's just it. That's just the opening.
Can I respond?
Yes. I just want to catch on I think maybe like one of the bottom lines is distrust is the poison. And I don't want to keep circulating poison. Like there's a place, like medicine can be strong and potent and feel poisonous to the body, like because it makes you throw up. But then there is poison that just like, it's just poison. And in our circulation movements being mastered by motion, I'd like to be a part of cycling out this distrust. And honoring our ancestors, even the ancestors who we judge as being the problem.
Right.
But not condoning their actions, but also saying like they've already paid, like the consequence has been paid times 7 through all the generations who have carried the quote trauma of their actions or the slavery that we all somehow participate in by being locked into the mainstream, lock and key, our 9 to 5s, like, all of that. Like it's already been paid forward. We don't need to keep going back and like broken record. I think it's a time for like liberating ourselves of that. And that's freedom going back 7 as well. It's when we do the work here, it's going in all the directions. That's it.
Is there any more?
No, that's it. That's
Are you
it.
certain?
Distrust is the poison.
Distrust is the poison.
And we have to be very careful with truth and how we use it and what we use it for.
I did not anticipate this when we began this 45-minute emotional roller coaster. I did not think that this is where it would bring us to.
This is what I've been trying to get out.
Yeah.
But it came with all the stuff that's piled on top of it.
It came with all the stuff. That's how it always works.
That's like, it's the mounds. It's like I had to like get up out from underneath the mound.
Get up.
The greater body of what I want to bring to my community is applying like the way that you do all of the head connections. Like I want to be able to do that on the heart level. And point, like, how can we actually take this immense head stuff that you bring, and I only can bring a little bit of, and like drop it down and bring it on this level, which right now is feeling like immensely painful.
Right. What you said when you were talking about, there are a couple things you said in the beginning, and particularly about the we don't really understand, and you have to be careful with truth and all of these things. That's the whole nature of the foundation of all of this, which is, this is a mystery. This is a mystery. What you think you know, you don't know. The head stuff, I mean, this is one of the things which I've said particularly a lot in the early stages, is like every story deconstructs. Every story that you hold can be looked at from another way and told from a different perspective, and it completely changes. That's the nature of stories. When we tell these stories, that's what the head stuff is. They're stories. And we tell them from such a way which is like, well, that doesn't make logical sense from the way which I've seen and understood history or understood anything. But what you're saying makes sense too. What it does is it allows for this collapse. Like that's really the the in my opinion, the value of the head stuff and the telling of the stories, it's not to like wow with like look at all of these sort of connections. It's a return to what the F is going on. What is this place? This is a mystery. I don't know. And so that allows the room for like I think what you're describing, like that middle path.
Yeah.
Like the middle,
which requires some like humility of the mind.
yes.
Like for the mind to get out of the way and kind of bow to the heart.
And humility of the heart, because as you said in the beginning, you were talking about feelings, and the feelings are judgments. Like, I feel a certain way about this history. Well, that's a feeling, but that's tied into a mind thing.
Right.
And like, you're thinking that I'm standing on a structure of the heart because it's feeling, but that can collapse too.
Right.
Scapegoating began as a specific practice within communities to, if you will, and there's a lot of ways you can justify what scapegoating is, but it's a way for communities to do away with, like, not have to carry like all of this like guilt or like I wish I would have done something different or like whatever it was, however the other time periods understood reality. They would have scapegoating rituals where one person would play the scapegoat, or a goat itself would be the symbol of all things bad and sacrifice it. So you could, like, understanding psychodrama as a practice, you're like, okay, there's a thing there. It's a dangerous thing, but like handled like with. So I wanted to point that out when we talked about scapegoating, and I want to add in this one thing, and which is what we've kind of gotten to a little bit, or at least I've focused on with the additional research as it relates to Sunbury. Sunbury, the land of Sunbury, was initially called Shamokin. Okay, and it had a very, very significant place in history culture, at least what we're told. And then at some point along the line, it was no longer called Shamokin and it was given this name Sunbury. And then this other town 20 miles away was given the name Shamokin. And when we can look at our stories...
Is that town also on the river?
No. Okay. It's about 20 miles outside of it. It's called Shamokin. And
when we look at the...
When we look at all of this from the synchromistic perspective, allows for looking at headspace from this weird, like, non-linear perspective, a surreal perspective. That Shamokin, that taking of like, well, this is Shamokin and now I'm going to put it over here and this is something else. That to me kind of fits into this, like what you were talking about before, of like a persona or a fakeness or a suppression of like emotion or a scapegoating. There's something about a history where we're just putting it elsewhere and we're like disconnecting it. Through this dance that you and I are doing, through the witness of the people who are seeing this, there's a collapse. There's a collapse in head, there's a collapse in like heart, which is based upon maybe feelings, which are based upon false stories, like all of that. And the whole purpose, in my opinion, is to find what you're describing as this middle path, which Jung would said naturally appears from the tension of the opposing forces. That's what I think we're doing. And this is what it looks like in real time. It's not pretty.
Well, I think the head is a lot of connecting dots. It's a lot like the bridges, building bridges.
Right.
And the mind, there is the left brain, right brain. The mind is wired for dualism. The actual left brain, right brain, it connects more through mucous membranes and chemical passing.
What's the thing called? It's got a CC initials.
I don't
but you
know.
What I'm talking about.
Like in neuropsychological work, like you want to mix the left brain and right brain, and you want there to be more nerve patterns crisscrossing the two. But still, at the end of the day, you have the left brain and the right brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so even those more like liquidy bridges, they're still bridges, like the synapses.
Right.
They're still bridges. And so the mind, as powerful as it is, it has limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there are limitations to the heart space. However, I'm not talking about the organ heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the field of a human.
Okay.
And it's just the center of the whole field, which is held together by the electrical warehouse of the mind, the whole human field.
Mm-hmm.
And the heart has, well, I guess it's just that the heart in human society and culture for some time has been so repressed. But the heart doesn't build bridges. The heart doesn't make connections. The heart is so much more like the river. It just flows. And this new episode of Loved by the Water called Mastered by Emotion, that's like where I'm really wanting to focus a lot of discussion and energy around. Because, and maybe in my videos, like the West Branch, I want to give so much energy to the West Branch because there's all these little clues and like this awakening of how can we relate more as a humanity from the heart, from this space that doesn't need bridges, but from the space that has the power to weave waters without limits. Now, right, like I said, there's probably limitations to that, but right now the only limitation has been that we operate in such a way that we prioritize the head space and we prioritize the making connections and dots and bridges because that's how our reality is constructed. And the only limitation right now that is around relating from the heart space or relating more just from this like river within is that it's it's secondary. If you have time for it in your day, if your relationship allows for it, if your community is accepting enough of what like pours through you, that's what I want to weave is the power of the mind and the power of the heart. I don't want to just flop it and say, well, the power of the heart is better than the power of the mind. Like that would be doing just kind of what I'm saying I did in the Sunbury, which is like the West Branch is better than the main branch. The main branch is polluted with all of this Masonic tattooing and domination culture seeding, and the West Branch is so pure and innocent and lovely. There's some truth to that, but I don't want to take that and go and say like, okay, well, one's better than the other. The head's better than the heart's better than the head. But how can we just take what the construction and just level it? And so that's what I'm really interested in, is how can we become the electrical field through the power of our mind and hearts by giving space, energy, time, attention to both equally. And it's going to feel imbalanced at first because we're so used to placing all of our emphasis here. So I have some more information to present on research on the activity on the island.
Head stuff?
Yes, but I'm bringing it with this long introduction of having realigned my heart in the way that I present this material. And like I said earlier, as I realigned my heart and all of the things that my mind was seeing and saying, and when I kept running up across like bad guy or fighting, I would turn it back on myself and say, where am I the bad guy and where am I fighting? And then how can I allow that to open me wider to receive deeper wisdom from my ancestors in the earth? And then also allowing myself to be mastered by my own emotional roller coaster with this work. It's like the diamond appeared. Like the mystery of the diamonds just was like, well, here I am. You almost like someone from deep inside the mound pushed this diamond thing up through the earth.
What's the center of the baseball diamond?
Home plate.
No, that's the point.
Oh, The pitcher's mound.
The mound.
The mound, yes.
Yeah.
But there's something to, we were starting our lines at home base.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of coming home.
Mm-hmm.
Coming home to whatever, like, you know, that sense of home. And feeling at home
mm-hmm.
here amidst, like, what my mind calls all this insanity and craziness and ick. And if I'm calling all that ick, then I'm basically not okay with myself
mm-hmm.
because this is my home.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned more than anything in our being mastered by motion, like physical movement all over the place, circulating, and emotional, mastered by my own emotional outpourings, is that this body is home. And this body is earth, air, fire, and water. And so if I'm projecting out and what I'm seeing is ick, I'm basically calling myself that. And like I said before we started recording this, I don't like being me sometimes, which feels more like truth than saying, like, I don't like being here on earth. They're just mirrors of one another. So on that somewhat dark and somber note, I would like to add that on those days where I really don't enjoy being me, and I don't enjoy being on this planet Earth, I hope that I'm not the only one that has those days. I find a lot of comfort and solace in the waters, hence my Loved by the Water Passion Project. And ironically, our oldest river, the Susquehanna, just got a shakedown. The earthquake in New Jersey happened today as I was editing and recording this very video and this very project, follow-up project. So yeah, you can see that map. There it is. The quake in New Jersey, it just encompassed the main branch of the Susquehanna River. So if you watched the Sunbury presentation and you heard my disposition, I really kind of had this feeling that there was something in the main branch that just wasn't totally pure of heart. As this was happening, as I was reconciling my own attitude about the mainstream society that the main branch of the Susquehanna River represents as an alchemical magic project, right? From early Masons, Rosicrucians of seeding the empire. You want to check out the Susquehanna Mystery by Susquehanna Alchemy. The river keeper, Michael Wan, his YouTube channel is Susquehanna Alchemy. And if you look up the Susquehanna Mystery, you'll eventually hear the content that explains this 400-year spell casting that happened on the Susquehanna River to build the empire. That 400-year time is over. I think we're about 10 to 15 years past that 400. But that alchemical container is still, it's a container, it's just like maybe sitting up on a shelf, and it's present, and it's an energy that we can see and find along the Susquehanna River. And right before this really powerful eclipse, we have this earthquake. So my take on the earthquake, just kind of reaching the river, is that it was shaking loose that container, kind of loosening it up and getting it ready for whatever this eclipse is going to be empowering the people to seed for the next 400 years. And that earthquake, I think, was a part of this purification process of shaking out what needs to be circulated. And in a couple of days, Michael, myself, and a really powerful group of people, whomever is called, is going to be walking the lands of the oldest river at the oldest confluence, right? So if the Susquehanna River is the oldest river, she's also, her confluence of the west branch and main branch, it's also the oldest confluence. The confluence is a portal. It's a threshold where two streams, where two creeks, where two rivers, wherever there's two flowing bodies of waters that merge, there is an opening to the other world or the underworld. There is a great access to our ancestors and to other beings. So it's not a space to take lightly. I would say it's definitely a space that you want to have your night vision goggles on. You know, my research process, it didn't end at the Sunbury Presentation. It kept going, and I just kept being drawn more and more to pay attention to the words portal, threshold, doorway. And as I was researching that, I also came across vault, because the west branch of the Susquehanna is considered an arc across the center of Pennsylvania. And the state of Pennsylvania, the logo is the keystone, which is the load-bearing stone of an archway, of a doorway arch. And they also were calling those archways vaults, because many times vaults had this kind of architecture as its opening. And aqueducts. If you think of like the old Roman, so there's the old Roman aqueducts, but the modern aqueducts are underground. So it's getting water from one body through the ground, through the earth to another location. So here we've got Susquehanna River, oldest confluence, oldest doorway to the underworld and other worlds. And there's this key, and we just had the key bridge collapse, and the keystone, and this lock and key, and what are we locking into place through giving our energy to something. So the next step was to begin researching the keystone. And what I found about the keystone, these are just keywords. The keystone locks in all else. So this is really important for us to have a very rich understanding of the keystone, because these archways, like the archways that held up the old Roman aqueducts, this river is also holding up its own flow, if you will. She's using this same archway and keystone design to flow energy across the land. So a keystone locks in all else. The keystone is the apex stone. It allows the whole arc to bear weight. And that's what is key for the aqueducts and for vaults that are kind of like built into the ground, is that this threshold can now bear weight on top of it. The keystone is self-balanced. The keystone is the preservation stone for the whole architectural structure of the threshold and of the portal functionality. And then also this article I was reading, it was an architectural design article about the keystone. It called the keystone a mystical trick. And the keystone was really important in creating these vaults. All right, so what is in these vaults across the lands of the Susquehanna River? Well, we need to first go and locate the keystones and or the arcs. Each branch, the west branch and the main branch, create the confluence or create the portal, this vault, of otherworldly activity. And so each branch carries a door, if you will. So when you overlay the two circles, imagine instead of them being circles, you have two arcs or two letter U's, and you're taking the round pieces where the keystones are, and you're going to bring the keystones together and then push them a little further so that the curved end of the arc is overlapping. And now you have a double door portal. Now you have a double door gateway, which is what is necessary to create access to the otherworld, underworld space. And that's I did not learn this from someone, but my thinking now, or my wisdom, is telling me that that is why a confluence is a gateway to our ancestors and to otherworld or underworld beings, because there is a flow of water holding different patterns. And as those patterns come together and overlap, they're creating a double, maybe it's not always a double door, but it's a double pattern. It's kind of like the Seder square is a magic kind of sigil to confuse the entities out in the matrix, and kind of throw them off, so that whatever is with the Seder square is kind of protected by this force field of confusion. So as waters come together and they mix their molecular design and overlay, it's kind of like this confusing pattern emerges, and it allows this like life force not just to flow across the land, but now as the water comes together, that life force is flowing up and down in all four directions. My thesis here is that oldest river, oldest confluence, oldest doorway, that there's even a higher architectural design going on here, that the rivers kind of themselves, the west branch, and you can see this, I have it up here, the west branch creates a natural arch over the center of Pennsylvania, over the Allegheny Mountains. So the main branch has what used to be called Shamokin Island. It was bought in 1877 by John B. Packer, and they've just named it Packer Island ever since. And so the keystone is hugely obvious on the main branch. But it's I'm taking this approach that it's the main branch. So it's the mainstream. So what's in the mainstream is all of this kind of like the players that created empire. And so that would be, where is the key masonry work? And there's actually a keystone on Packer Island, at the tip of the island. Before European settlers came and kind of took over the island, it was mostly a place for community, ritual, ceremony. There were lots of mound sites all over the island. Now, over time, this island has been totally taken over. There's an airport. The airport was first put on the island for mail to be a quicker and easier transit to this area. Again, for the economy and for the building up of the capitalistic wealth that was occurring early on. Also a quarry on the island. There is a state park. There's a campground. And there used to be an amusement park. All of the activity was geared for probably mid to high social, economic class people to take in the island. The amusement park, it was a horse race track. And a funny thing, the horse race track, it was a mile-long horse track. And at that time, there was only one other mile-long horse track in the area, and it was all the way in Allentown. So just earmark that, Allentown. I'm going to go back. There was a Reverend John Heckwelder, and he was a Moravian missionary. He lived with the Delaware, and he wrote a book about his time living with the Delaware. And then when he was done, because this was his professional work, he just retired. And he retired to, guess where? Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So Allentown, Pennsylvania and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania are linked in to Shamokin / Packer Island, and oddly enough, this is just like a fun thing that keeps happening. I mean, it happens ad nauseum, actually, and Michael and I have talked about it on his Susquehanna Alchemy channel about the synchronicities. He and I have spent 2 Christmases together, and we spent Christmas 1 in Allentown and Christmas 2 in Bethlehem. So that's just like a funny, weird side note that as I was doing this research, I was like, how are Michael and I tied into the history here of this island? Because we're following some type of energy flow, or it's guiding us. And one more fun fact is that here you see a picture of little bell tents in the background. This is a picture from the island, and Michael and I lived in a tent that looked just like that for a couple of months. So there's that fun fact. So the keystone is very obvious here on the main branch. It is the key that locks in a lot of this darkness of domination culture. And this is kind of like a clear attitude shift for me, is that this darkness of domination culture, or the mainstream society being built off the life force of the main branch of the Susquehanna River. Like, first of all, the river's fine, and if the river's fine, I'm fine. And if the river can make peace and forgive and like release all, so can I, so can we. And so I've been shifting myself into this mentality that this masonry work of this keystone logo, locking in and having all this foot traffic circulating, it's actually just circulating a huge 400-year alchemical container of whatever this culture is. And so thank you to whoever put that there, because that means we can tap into something. And for those of us who are going with intention, we can go and we can kind of touch that sigil, right? Like, so just be clear here when I talk about energy, like this is a powerful sigil that was embedded on really sacred land on the oldest river, right past the oldest confluence. So we can get in there, we can get our feet and our hands in there, and we can be a part of the alchemy, instead of just kind of blindly walking past it and circulating whatever it wants to be. And honestly, it's going to be whatever it wants to be anyways. But the fact that we can be co-creators and participants in what's happening in this alchemical container for the next 400 years, and we at least know, like, this is where the darkness lives. And we know that we can't exist just in light. We need both night and day. We need both active and rest. We need both masculine and feminine. And here we know that this keystone is locking in and holding a space for it to be very clear where this energy exists. So, take that as you would like to and create your own inferences. I would like to think that this is not a doomsday story. And I like to believe it's not a doomsday story, and that we need to go in with jackhammers and jackhammer up those bricks. That's not necessarily going to be helpful in many ways. So that's the keystone of the main branch. So the west branch. The west branch is less tattooed. There's not like a Sunbury where electricity was first born. There's no big industries, really. Williamsport is probably one of the largest towns along the west branch. Really, it's that geography of the Allegheny Mountains that protects it from such activity. There can't be a ton of industrial development, and it's kind of so zigzaggy that it doesn't make sense for commerce. So Pennsylvania's logo is the keystone, and in the middle of Pennsylvania in the land itself, there is this powerful old river that creates an arc right in the middle. So I said, so where is the keystone? So if the West Branch Susquehanna River is the arc itself, then the river has the keystone on it. And I don't think I'm going to find another keystone that's so mainstream looking like the actual masonry keystone on the island. I'm going to have to go digging. So there's two options here. The first option is, I said, let me just look at it. Let me just look at the West Branch, and what is by the eye, what is the most obvious visual top of the arc? So when I did that, I came to an area called Renovo, and Renovo is Portuguese for renewal. And then right near Renovo, the town, in the river is Tamarack Island, which is a really powerful medicinal plant. And I said, okay, this is getting interesting. Renewal, that, the keystone is all of those really powerful things. A keystone never lets the whole collapse. And so here's this renewal space, this renewal town by this medicinally named island. Okay, this is interesting. I love it. And because I said, what is this arcing? What is the West Branch? If you're looking at an archway, what is actually sitting at the bottom of the threshold? And so I went south underneath that, and I found Penn's Cave. And oddly enough, actually a couple of hours later, after I had never heard of Penn's Cave. Penn's Cave is actually the only all-water cave in America. According to its website. I did not fact check that. I'm just taking it at face value. And then a couple hours later, I found this mug in the house where Michael and I are house sitting. And like I said, I had never heard of Penn's Cave. And then I just go to get a mug for our ginger tea. And there's Penn's Cave mug. A nice little souvenir here. Okay, and so Penn's Cave is right next to Lake Nittany, and it's an hour south. All of this was like really interesting, and I wanted it to be a more complete story, but it just wasn't adding up. And so as I was doing all of these pieces, I came across something that said Tamarack Island, this medicinal plant, Tamarack Island, is 95 miles into the West Branch of the Susquehanna. So the West Branch of the Susquehanna, different sources say different things. Wikipedia says it's 243 miles long, but many other seems like resources that would pay attention more to detail, especially for boaters, say that it's 228 miles. So half of that is 114. So by the way the water flows on the river, 95 miles is not the middle. 114 miles would be the middle. So Tamarack Island and Renovo are my option 1 for where the West Branch Keystone is. Option 2, which I think is more kind of objectively aligned with the flow of the river, at mile 14 on the West Branch, the first thing that popped up was People's Church, which I took that as a nice sign. This is the People's Church. This is now the people's alchemical container for us to hold ourselves in a sovereign manner. Well, then I said, okay, if this is my keystone area, let me look at the distance now between my two keystones. And so I put the measure tool right on the keystone on Earth maps, and I drew it out to the space between Lock Haven and Farnsville, which is really just a little bump in the river, like a river bend, a pretty sharp river bend, and it was 40 miles by the way the bird flies. The crow? I think it's the crow. but let's just be more general and say the bird. I don't necessarily want to bring crow energy into this. So by the way the bird flies, between the two keystones is 40 miles, which when I got to that, I said, okay, that does it for me. 40 miles is reminiscent enough of the 40th parallel, which is the whole crux and the whole pinnacle kind of mystery point of the Susquehanna Mystery, and the maps, the old maps of the Susquehanna Mystery, and what was originally embedded at the 40th parallel, the intersection of the Susquehanna River and the 40th parallel. So now here, along the rivers on the west branch and on the main branch, our keystones are only 40 miles apart. And so by way of earth, air, wind, and fire, these keystones, or these arcways, are they're not overlapping actually. They're more like parallel, side by side, creating, if you could see two arcways side by side, like the doorways, like the aqueducts of the old Roman Empire, side by side, you have 4 lines, like 4 parallel lines running now diagonally through the state of Pennsylvania. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment of those diagonal lines. Okay, and so I just kept going a little further, and Farnsville was settled by Boston capitalists, and the first thing that was created there was the first successful hot blast iron furnace called dry masonry. So that's there on our West Branch Keystone, and it was actually the first and only successful hot blast on the continent for a while. And the first thing that they did, let me backtrack. There was actually a master mason who supervised the build of the iron furnace. And then the first thing that they did with that iron furnace was make bricks for a mansion that Queen Maria Cristina of Spain had built for herself along the river, just a few miles further down the road. And she actually never made it overseas to live in her mansion, but it still exists there. It's been turned into, something else. So it doesn't stop there. There's also something in Lock Haven. There is the Great Island in the Susquehanna River, and it has this connection with Shamokin Island, or what is now Packer Island. Both islands were very key in that many native paths converged on these islands. So the Shamokin path, which actually went much further east than Packer Island and went all the way west, at least to the Great Island and on, because the Great Island, the Shamokin path ran through it. It also ran through Packer Island and kept going both east and west from those islands, right? So I guess I should be clear here that the West Branch creates its own arc by way of its flow, and then the way that the keystone of the main branch is positioned, the keystone it's positioned in such a way that the tip of the island is the top of the arc, and then the legs of the arc would run north, while the legs of the arc on the West Branch, those are more south. So we have an arc with legs kind of going south and an arc with legs going north. So, right, we're talking about the keystone, and we're talking about the lock and the key and locking in energy in the arc. All of this language is running in a very thick, fast maze and web of what is going on here. And so I turned to Lock Haven and I said, oh, another lock and key reference. But as I'm zooming in along these ridges and crests, I come across this tiny little Petty Memorial Park, Peddie. And so, I'm just like, isn't that funny? This is petty. Like, it's nothing, it's silly. But I zoom in and I see that there are two baseball diamonds, and they're kind of facing opposite each other. You see on the picture here. And not this is where I now sit down with Michael, and I'm like, Michael, I need your map, your river keeper, river surveying map kind of skills to go into this with me, because I remember that baseball diamond right before the West Branch joins with the main branch. There is a water treatment plant and then a little baseball field, a small singular municipal baseball field. It remained a mystery. After the Sunbury presentation, I just was not appeased. I remember just saying, make what you will of whatever the diamond is. And so here is the diamond in the rough. The West Branch and the main branch have keys in common. Not only keystones, baseball diamonds. And so I'd love for you to go check out Michael's video. It's one of his 40th Parallel Mystery series with Ross Ben. He does a little bit about baseball diamonds, and he goes deep on guidance on what baseball diamonds are all about. And so when he and I started playing around, this is what we got. Cooperstown. We got to go all the way to the Baseball Hall of Fame, where this whole ritual of American baseball was birthed. Cooperstown, the beginning of the main branch of the Susquehanna River. And what we found there was also, you can see here, the double day field, which ironically, double day, double door, double portal, all the way at the beginning of the main branch is shooting down this energy of a baseball field diamond, a really powerful sigil to mark on the earth. You've got double day, and it points southwest, just how the main branch flows. We connected the Cooperstown baseball field with the West Branch Petty Memorial Park, that keystone of the West Branch arc. We connected those baseball fields with then Williamsport, also on the main branch, further down river, but Williamsport would be the Little League, which I had referenced in the previous Sunbury presentation. The West Branch holds the Little League, the innocent version of the baseball claim to fame. So if you zoom in on Williamsport, again, in the nature of the West Branch being this otherworldly kind of flow, you've got the Little League World Series complex. But the complex is made of two baseball diamonds. And there you got them. So just like with Petty Memorial Park, the keystone of the West Branch, I just put the point in the middle. Here we have the connection of right where you see the dot above Selinsgrove. That is the main branch masonry keystone. And then Petty Memorial Park is the West Branch baseball diamond keystone. The two blue lines that are going north are connected up to Cooperstown, and the little tiny blue line that is kind of covering the I and the A of Memorial, that's Williamsport. So we started getting really carried away here. We followed the tattoos on the land. We followed the shape of the diamond and kind of the way that they were pointing, the direction in which they were pointing, to come up with this really elongated triangle within a triangle. Double day, double doorway, double triangle. Here you can see that this Cooperstown source of the main branch baseball diamond to baseball diamond on the west branch at the keystone mark of the archway. When you connect those, they create this diagonal line that if you keep drawing it further, it parallels the already kind of well-known ley line that Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, they built on areas where the land had the most power. And then we can see an echo of that line go right through the middle of Pennsylvania. Let me keep going with this and create a pentagram, because clearly this is the leg of a star. This is just one arm of 5 points. And so I created the inner pentagram, and because of all of this, like the eclipse cross intersection, I just had to make an X in the pentagram in this way. I don't know, I was just intuitively led to do it because I was curious. And then what popped up at the X just left of it was Rosencrantz and Rosencrantz Falls, which is really like phonetically related to Rosencreutz and Rosicrucian. So there's that funny, just like a little funny thing there. And then I said, but wait a second, I'm not too far away from that Penn's Cave, my option 1 keystone, like my option 1 archway keystone area, and like what I discovered was underneath it. And so I said, okay, let's draw this and include Penn's Cave, the only all-water cave in America, so they claim. And then what I was left with to connect was creating a home plate. And so I just, this is like a home plate shape, and just playing with this idea of what is all of this, like what is the river and an all-water cave, what is that bringing us home to? And then here is the star that I created off of the angles of the pentagram. So connecting to Buffalo, connecting through Pittsburgh, connecting down along the Appalachian, connecting out through, kind of out towards the bay here under New Jersey. And then what's at the center of it, even without the connecting the pentagram inside, it seems like Penn's Cave is pretty kind of close to being in the middle, along with the Rosencrantz and Rosencrantz Fall are right in the middle of this star, which is pretty darn close to being right in the center of Pennsylvania. That keystone might be our key star. This whole process for me really has felt like finding the diamond in the rough. Some of this material can come across, especially for me and my living such an alternative lifestyle, I have a kind of hard relationship with main branch, mainstream, and there is a sharpness. There's a sharpness in me, and a lot of this process has been softening my sharpness and getting sharp in ways that are going to allow me to open up and receive love, wisdom, hope, the message that a keystone never lets the whole collapse. And here we've got this pentagram, which connects the West Branch diamond, which is also the marker of the keystone of the West Branch, and then the main branch keystone, which is not a diamond, but it's a keystone. So the keystone and the diamond both have like a lot of the same synonyms of weight bearing and balancing, like the balanced facets of a diamond. There's a lot of similarities there. Anyways, drop down to State College on the left. There's a baseball diamond there, and so these lines kind of follow that push from home plate. And then Harrisburg, the little dot under Harrisburg, is City Island on the Susquehanna River, and City Island has a baseball field. So they got a baseball field on the island, on City Island, right near Harrisburg there. And so the fifth the fifth point of the pentagram has yet to, it is eluding us. We just kind of put it in there to create symmetry, and we have yet to discover what that fifth point is. But yeah, so there you have it, the baseball diamond, the majorly overlooked kind of tattoo on Earth maps on the river. And you know, what's in the middle of a baseball diamond, but like Michael said in the earlier part of this video, a mound. And you know, I don't want to say fortunately or unfortunately or cast any blame or shame, but it is like European settlers came and brought this tradition, and they leveled mounds that were on the islands and all across the lands to build up something new and different, and then create these mounds that don't really have any ancestral love, life force in them, but they're a commercial industry, baseball, and potentially even a ritual commercial industry, depending on what you take in from Michael's information about the history of baseball. Take it as it is what it is, and you know, whether we call it dark or light, it's not in my place to judge the artifacts, right? Because really these are now it's all artifacts, and what could be most helpful is to learn from these artifacts without having an attitude of distrust or casting blame and shame, but letting the wisdom of what's showing up speak to you, and what comes alive in you as you notice these things. And at first what came alive in me is something that needed to be put to rest, because I wasn't feeling like it was helpful anymore for me to hold this distrust or this negativity towards the people who built baseball diamonds, because, you know, how many of them knew that they were creating this mega massive like ley line grid of kind of casting energy? You know, sometimes I like to think that the Susquehanna River, being the goddess herself, is just sometimes using human life force to create her own little tattoo markers of how she might want energy to flow, because she's just taking care of the land and the people, no matter what the people do, no matter how much war and fighting and scalping and savaging we do to one another. She just wants to take care of the balance of all things, and she'll use people to do that. So I hope that this update has been, you know, helpful and interesting. I just want to end this on the note of just how beautiful, how this has taken me back, and how beautiful the land and the water are, and how much they remind me, because they are sovereign, even though people say they own land, and you can't own water. Both of them are completely sovereign and are working together in all ways all the time, no matter what we put on them or take away from them. And I have wrestled for so many years with what my ancestors, my European settler ancestors, have done here on this land. But then I've learned that, you know, it's been done to us, and the people that were here before were doing it to each other. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, well, it's domination society. And I'm like, well, you know what, it's not like I don't want to be like, well, there was 5 people who designed it to be this way, and so, we're doomed. No, you know, however the story constructs, it can deconstruct. And I just want to find the most helpful bottom line here. And for me, it's the love that's found in the land and the water, and the gentle wisdom that they have to offer if you'll just be soft enough and open enough to receive it. So thanks for tuning in with me, and I'd encourage you to go dig deeper on this on your own, and I'd be happy for you to reach out and share anything further that you found. Have a good night, and Blessings on your eclipse.